What's going on, guys? We're back. This is going to be part 3 of the guns for SHTF, or shit hitting the fan. So the first segment I did a very broad overview. We talked about rifles, shotguns, and handguns very briefly. I feel like I kind of explained shotguns adequately, so we went on to rifles in the next category, or in the next presentation, and part 2 I guess would be, we covered the AK-47 and the AR-15 because those are ultimately, those seem to be what people gravitate to, and for good reason. And we went over kind of the differences between the two and my pick in that situation. So both of those videos are going to be in the playlist that I'm linking in the corner. Today we're going to be talking about my personal favorite, and these are going to be handguns. So handguns have several caveats, things to be aware of, myths, misconceptions, things like that. And they are very abundant, at least here where I live in Georgia. So that's the other thing, guys. A lot of what I say is going to be predicated on the laws here in Georgia, and obviously the United States. If I have any international viewers watching, you're going to have to check your own laws. If you live in a different state than Georgia, again, check your own laws. It's no secret that I am of the political opinion that all gun laws are infringements, so we're not going to rehash that. I just don't want anybody getting in trouble on my account. So, handguns. Let's go over a couple of myths. Number one, we'll start with this one just because it is indicative of a lot of the common handgun types on the market. So we can see that the magazine is clear and the chamber is clear. And we'll go over how to clear a semi-automatic handgun here in just a second. Which brings me to another point. Most of today I'm going to be talking about semi-autos as opposed to revolvers, which I did cover in part 1. Revolvers are adequate. Revolvers certainly are powerful enough, in most cases way more powerful than their semi-automatic components. However, I lean towards a good reliable semi-auto versus a revolver because of ammunition capacity, ease of reload, ease of repair, clearing malfunctions, etc. Would be my recommendation. So the number one misconception with a handgun is that they're easy to use. Inherently, a handgun is not. In part 1 I did demonstrate with a handgun. Again, we just cleared the gun, guys, that you have 2 points of contact. You have your firing hand or dominant hand, which can be your right hand or it can be your left hand. That's your number 1 point of contact, and then your support hand. That's it. That's your only 2 points of contact on the gun, whereas with a rifle you have your dominant hand, your support hand, your shoulder, and then your cheek as you shoulder that stock. So inherently handguns are a less stable shooting platform. They are more challenging to master because of the short barrel. Your accuracy is already a little bit more diminished, or substantially more diminished than a rifle. There's all sorts of things play into it, but these do inherently take more practice to become proficient with than a rifle does or a shotgun does. So that first misconception that you can buy one of these off the shelf and be ready to go is not true. The other thing is that training is, it seems to be taking a second place towards target shooting. I have a video on that if you guys are interested. I'll put a link to that down in the comments. There's going to be a lot of videos I link as resources. Again, these videos are primarily geared to people who are just now buying their first gun or just now getting into firearms. And there's a lot they need to learn very quickly, if that is the case, if you're panic buying. So I also have an introduction to handgun shooting. That'll be down there. These guns take some practice, they take some training. A lot of training is going to center around safety. So we'll go ahead and we'll set this to the wayside for now. I'm actually carrying a handgun now. It is fully loaded, and I'm going to show you how to clear that handgun. So for starters, this is my Beretta M9A3. First thing we're going to do, notice where my finger has stayed during this whole talk is off the trigger. It's very important. That's called trigger discipline. Your finger should not go in there until you are ready to shoot. You should assume every firearm is loaded. And a lot of these rules are going to translate across from handguns to rifles to shotguns. But I'm focused on this because this is probably what you will be carrying if you're carrying a firearm, and by virtue of having a firearm close to your body, potentially pointed at parts of your body throughout the day, this is important. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to use the magazine release to drop this magazine. The issue a lot of people run into is they assume the gun is now unloaded. It's not. I can tell you for a fact this one's not, because I carry with one in the chamber. You are going to want to cycle the action on the gun, maintaining trigger discipline, maintaining where your hand goes in relation to the front of the barrel. As you bring the slide back, in this case I was prepared to catch a round because I knew a round was in there. If the round falls on the dirt, that's not the biggest issue. Your goal is to make sure that nothing was in that chamber that would make this weapon ready to fire. This gun is now cleared and safe. You see no magazine inserted, no round in that chamber. So we'll go ahead and let the slide down. I will decock it. We'll talk more about this later. You can see it does have a light on the front. It has a light on the front because I carry my firearms with lights. Touch on that more. I touched on it some in part 2. I think that's important. So I want to start with this gun. A lot of people are going to recognize this. They may not know what it's called. No mag inserted. Round is not in chamber. There's no chamber in there. This is a 1911. This happens to be a Sig Sauer variant, so there are some different variants, versions, etc., sizes, whatever. It's a very common gun. It's called a 1911 because it was designed and adopted in 1911. This is what you see in a lot of World War I movies, World War II movies, and on all the way on up. This was the official sidearm design of the United States military until 1985. Shoots a 45 caliber round, a 45 ACP. I'll show you what that looks like. Very short and fat round. The guns I have out here, the other two are 9mm, so I'll talk more about caliber selection here in a bit. 45 ACP, it uses a single stack magazine. So what that means is the rounds are stacked one on top of the other in a single stack. This one holds 8, some of them hold 7, some of them hold more. Most of them are going to be 8 or 7. By contrast, you can see this magazine is wider despite having a smaller projectile. This is a 9mm mag, it goes in that Beretta. This is a double stack magazine, so you might be able to see it from the top down, but these rounds are staggered. They're not a true double stack, but it is a staggered magazine. Hence why this magazine holds 17 rounds, this one holds 8. So the rounds are also smaller, etc., etc. This CZ P10C, the first gun I had up earlier, it also uses a double stack mag. These guns are kind of, they're classics. They are American classics. They have a manual safety here on the side, so I can pull this trigger right now and nothing is going to happen. Push that safety down, your hammer will fall, and if the gun reloaded, it would, of course, go off. It would fire. So these guns are not inherently bad. I do think there are better options. I am not a fan of a safety on a defensive pistol with the proper amount of training, because that is one more step that if I had to draw this gun from the holster before I can use it to confront a threat, I'm going to have to drop that safety. Not the biggest deal, but you need to train around it. I personally am not a fan of them on carry guns. So that's a very common design. There are some good brands that make good 1911s. I've had good luck with this Sig Sauer. I've also had decent luck with Kimber, although those are typically, you're paying more for the name than the gun, in my opinion. They do seem to be somewhat reliable. Les Baer Customs. There's a whole bunch of boutique 1911 brands out there. I would shy away from those if you can help it, from the standpoint of they are going to take more training. They do shoot a heavier, more expensive round. The 45 weighs, the bullet projectile commonly weighs about 230 grains, where the nominal or most common weight for a 9mm projectile is 115 grains. So double the projectile weight, not really double the cost, but it is significantly more expensive as far as ammunition goes. And you're going to need ammunition because you're going to need to practice. So cost of ownership of a 1911 is going to go up from that standpoint alone, not to mention that to get a good entry, reliable, quality 1911, the cost is going to be significantly higher than some of the other designs. Next, we'll go over the Beretta. Again, just for safety's sake, we're going to check. There is no magazine in here, and there is no round in the chamber. Guys, it's a good idea to check that stuff out. Definitely don't get complacent with it. There are a lot of people that are killed or injured every year by unloaded guns. If you don't believe me, look it up. It's a tragic thing. It's a preventable thing. So, to give you guys a good look at the gun itself without the light, I'll take that off. So here you go. This is this one's a little snazzy. I've done a little bit of work to it. The principle of what I'm going to talk to you guys about is going to be the same. So as you can see, I do have a hammer here, like the 1911. It is an exposed hammer, but it is down. This type of firearm, this is a double to single action firearm, can be fired directly like this. So if I had a round in the chamber, I pulled it out, even though the hammer is back. Try to figure out the best way to show you guys. When I pull this trigger, if you watch this hammer, as I'm pulling it, the hammer comes back and then releases. Your first shot is going to be like that. So fire our first shot, semi-automatic doing what they do. The recoil impulse of that round being fired is going to cycle the slide, eject the spent shell casing, put a new one in, and now you see that the hammer is back. and then the trigger resets when you let off of it. And the rest of your shots, as long as there are rounds in the magazine, are going to be single action. So double action, you're pulling the trigger from here. Single action, you're pulling the trigger from there. So it's a shorter, lighter, crisper trigger pull by virtue of it not having to pull that hammer back and then release it. I like these style guns. I'd be lying if I said to you that this was the best style of gun for you to get. It may not be. One thing is for sure, this is going to take a lot of time and practice with to get proficient at shooting them. The single action trigger is very easy to learn. It's a very nice trigger. The double action trigger pull is what is going to take practice. That is a longer, heavier trigger pull, and keeping the sights aligned while you shoot it is definitely going to take some work. It's going to take some effort on your part. This may be right for you, this may not. I'm not saying that you can't learn how to do it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get one. I'm saying be prepared for the fact that you are going to have to put more time and effort into learning this and getting proficient with it, because that first shot, number one, if you are not skilled at using this in double action mode, that shot could go errantly, miss your target. Number one, that could cost you a fight if you're in one. Number two, that could hurt somebody that you care and love about, or even if you don't, somebody innocent that's not involved in that altercation, and you are legally, morally, ethically, every other whatever, responsible for every round that comes out of this gun. You need to make sure that you have the training and proficiency to get those rounds where you are trying to get them to go. Enough on that. I don't mean to lecture you, but it is something that really pisses me off when people carry guns flippantly without putting the time and effort into to make sure that they are an asset and not a liability. The third style of gun is going to be the most common in today's market. The other two had their time where they were the top dogs. They are still popular among certain segments of shooters, mostly people that are into guns. They're not so much from I have one gun, it's to defend myself, I don't care about shooting them for fun. It's just a tool in my toolbox. Those two aren't really that popular anymore. They're out there, but they're not king of the hill. This design is going to be a striker fired pistol. So what we'll do, we'll check the mag well. There is nothing in there. And now we will check the chamber. No bullets in there. So good to go. This model is a CZ P10C. I brought this out here because I am intimately familiar with this gun. I love this gun, etc. I did not bring my Glock out here, which probably would have been a good choice, but this gun functions almost identically to a Glock. So Glocks are going to be kind of the king of the hill. A lot of law enforcement agencies carry them. They are known, I think, the world over for their reliability. In the gun community, we often refer to them as the Honda Civic of guns. That's not a bad thing. That just means that it is a very basic gun that will do what it's designed to do out of the box 99.9% of the time. There's always going to be lemons and defective units with anything, and guns are no exception. But Glocks do have a very, very good track record. They are plain, bare bones, utilitarian guns. They also, because a lot of new gun owners get hung up on this, they do not have a safety. So that makes them ideal for a lot of people as a defensive weapon. You don't have that extra step when you present that firearm to get it into use. Now, a lot of people are going to be alarmed, about the safety. This is going to be your primary safety, this finger, knowing where it's at, training yourself to keep it where it needs to be. This CZ P10C is basically a more ergonomic version of a Glock 19. It is pretty much a copy of a Glock 19 in terms of function, so anything I tell you on here is going to, for the most part, translate over to Glocks. You can see here there is some texturing right there. That is a very perfect natural place for that trigger finger to rest when you are not actively shooting. It is the same on both sides. This gun is set up for ambidextrous use, which is very nice out of the box. With these guns, what essentially happens is you have a striker assembly. You can see there's no exposed hammer, but you have a striker assembly inside the slide that controls your firing pin and everything. When you go to, it is pre-cocked by virtue of cocking the weapon. It is now pre-cocked. When you go to pull the trigger the rest of the way, let's see if I can show you on camera, you are actually finishing cocking that striker and then releasing it. So it's and you can see the trigger stays depressed. So now in order to get that to work again, the slide would work after firing that round. It would eject the spent shell, chamber a new shell from the magazine, or a new cartridge from the magazine, and you can see the trigger is cocked and ready to go. So it is kind of like a double action, single action, but not really, because your trigger pull is going to be the same every time. You're not going to have that first double action trigger pull followed by single action pull. And it's not a true single action because by virtue of pulling the trigger, you are also cocking that striker the rest of the way. This is by and large the most popular firing mechanism on handguns today, and for good reason. Every trigger pull is going to be the same, whether it's the first round out of the mag or the last. So it's very easy to learn how to control that trigger and learn your gun, so to speak. This gun, I've had a lot of luck with it. It has been a carry gun of mine for a long time. I find no fault with these. I absolutely give this my endorsement as well. Glock 19s get my endorsement. The M&P series get my endorsement. They're all good guns. They all have a little bit of individuality to them that's going to come down to your preferences for the most part. So I would urge people to try as many flavors of handgun as they can before they buy one. I realize that may not be an option right now with the way things are going, but that's typically the advice I give. So if you have a friend that's really into guns, that has a lot of handguns, see if he'll take you out shooting, or at a minimum, see if he'll let you hold them. I know ammo is kind of hard to get right now, so see if he'll let you hold the guns. Make sure they fit your hand. Some guns are going to work better with some hand sizes than others, and a lot of guns have replaceable back straps, that piece right here on the grip, to accommodate different sizes. Like this is a medium one. It works good for me. It allows me to get my proper finger placement on the trigger, but some guns don't, and some gun back strap sizes don't accommodate all hand sizes. So just get out there. The more exposure you have to them, the better educated you'll be to make a purchase that works for you. Now you can see here, this has a rail on the bottom. This rail is important. This rail allows you to do things like put weapons lights on there. Yes, this light is sticking out further than the muzzle of the gun. No, it's not really a big deal. A lot of people think it may be. It's not. You are going to get some powder burn along the top of the light by virtue of the blast from the muzzle. Not a big deal. Clean. I wouldn't even worry about it on the light housing. On the light lens here, it can be cleaned off fairly easily. You can also, before you're going to the range, apply some chapstick or something to the lens of the light, and then it should wipe that deposited carbon off fairly easily. If you're going to carry a gun with a light, which I think you should, I think that is the prudent decision to do. It's the responsible thing. It is important that you practice at the range with the light. These lights, this is a larger example of one, but these lights add a couple ounces to the weight of the gun. They add it to the front of the gun, changes the way the weapon handles. Muscle memory is a thing. So practice with your light on. I wouldn't worry too much about damaging the light. If it's a reputable weapons light, it's going to hold up just fine to that. So I'll put links in the descriptions on some of the lights I use and can personally attest to, and there are a lot of other ones out there to choose from. Just do your research, make sure they're reputable, make sure they're trusted by people in the industry. So the other thing we need to talk about, and this is the only one I have out here, the one I was using, is holsters. This is actually a newer holster. This is one I just got from my folks over at Lucky Coyote. I'll drop a link to their website in the description. These guys are phenomenal. Kydex makers. Kydex is a type of thermoformable plastic, so you mold it by heat. You get them molded for specific guns, and I'm going to show you why I like this. So this holster is molded for this Beretta, and not only that, it is molded for this Beretta with this light on it. So what that does is it provides a very good fit, fits like a glove, and I want you to notice something, and this is going to be important of all holsters. A holster has two functions. One, to hold the gun securely, and number two, to protect the trigger guard area. If your holster doesn't do those two things at a minimum, it is a garbage holster. It is a holster that has no business being even labeled a holster because it fails at its two basic jobs. Hold the gun securely and protect the trigger area. A lot of negligent and accidental discharges are caused by people reholstering, and that's because things are able to get in this trigger guard and pull the trigger while you push the gun in. Even with a good holster, that can happen. So I wasn't going to go too far into training in this video, but when you reholster, look and make sure that nothing is in your holster when you're putting your gun in there. That's how you can avoid that. You'll have some Call of Duty commando types telling you that you should be looking at the threat while you're reholstering your gun. That's demonstrably false. If you still think that threat, or still have reason to believe that that threat is an issue, you shouldn't be putting your gun away. So look your gun into your holster. A lot better to do that than potentially shoot yourself. And a lot of things that where people carry guns, a lot of areas in your body near there are important. You have your thigh, which has your femoral artery. If you're like me and you carry appendix position, which is in the front, slightly to the right, you have your reproductive area down there, among other things. Not a good area to take around. So it's important to make sure that nothing is in the trigger guard of the gun when you're putting it in. The reason I like Kydex, it's rigid. This holster is not going to degrade over time. I have a whole video on that I'll put in the description for you guys. This material really does not degrade. It's rigid. It can crack under stress. It can crack under prolonged use. I have not had that happen to any of mine yet, but it can happen, and I drill a lot with my holsters. So this one's brand new, but I have some that I've had for years with no issues. Leather holsters can eventually degrade, and often do, and you get it gets a little flappy, and when it gets flappy, the corner of the leather can push into the trigger guard area and engage that trigger while you're holstering. Other than that, I like having a rigid holster. I know that this holster is molded for this gun and for this light. I don't have to worry about universal fits. I would stay away from those in most cases. Get something that is for your gun. There's a lot of good holster makers out there. I go with Lucky Coyote because I tried them out a couple years ago. They are veteran owned, veteran operated, and they've been phenomenal. It was my 4th or 5th holster from them. And you're going to pay for quality goods. It takes time. Each of these has to be individually molded. It takes time to get all your hardware mounted in the right spot, things like that. So be prepared to invest a little bit in that, and I think it's a worthwhile investment. So good holsters. What else am I forgetting here? Carry a light on your gun, please. Got a whole video on that. Sage Dynamics has a video on that. I'll put descriptions to both of those in the comments. And we'll talk about ammo. So right now, the current ammo for the United States military is 9mm. A lot of your police departments are going back to 9mm. But typically in the United States, we have the big three when it comes to handgun calibers: 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, and 45 ACP. There's a host of other handgun cartridges out there, but those are the big three. Those are by and large the most common handgun cartridges here in the U.S. 40 Smith & Wesson was a kind of an answer to a problem that didn't really exist. Going all the way back to the 80s, it gained popularity. There was the perceived notion that it was better than a 9mm. And now a lot of departments are realizing, including the FBI, that the increased recoil of the 40 Smith & Wesson and marginal ballistic gain over the 9mm isn't worth it. So they're often going back to the 9mm in droves, which I think is a good choice. The 9mm is the most common pistol cartridge in the world. So it's no secret to regular viewers, I'm not a fan of the 40 Smith & Wesson. I don't say that ignorantly. I carried one for years. This is not a round that I would ever recommend to a new shooter. I often recommend 9mm across the board. I've got videos on why I like 9 and why I hate 40 if you want to check those out. It's not really super important for today's discussion. Those are kind of humorous videos, but at least the 40 one is. 45 is a good round. I'm not going to sit here and bash it. It is a good round. It is a phenomenal round in a lot of ways, especially if you are running a suppressor on your gun, which I don't think my target audience, I don't think that is the biggest concern right now, but I'm not saying 45 is bad, so nobody get out your torches and pitchforks, but it is expensive, and especially if you are new to the world of handguns and you're new to getting prepared to defend yourself, I think that that's not a good option. I would have to say it's going to take you a lot more time to master the recoil impulse of the 45 I should say, 42 for that matter, and more money for both the 40 and the 45. So I would urge you to get a 9mm. Ammo is very common. Most of the time it's easy to find. Right now we are kind of in a shortage, if you will. But it will, if ammo comes back on the shelves, 9mm is going to be among those calibers that do. It's relatively lightweight, relatively inexpensive. Now, when new shooters typically start shooting, one of the first things that shocks them is how expensive ammo is. And I'm not making fun of them, it's a kind of a shock, especially people that grew up hearing about older people shooting and they'd get a box of ammo for a couple dollars. Those days are gone, partly due to inflation, partly due to popularity, and there are people that price gouge in times like these. So I buy my ammo typically in higher quantities because I do shoot a lot typically. It's my range area for new viewers. I'm fortunate to be able to shoot here where I live. And I think that that's a smarter way to buy your practice ammo, is in bulk. Now we need to talk about, I don't think I even have any full metal jacket rounds out here. Full metal jacket round, we can use this to teach real quick. I have a video on why we carry hollow points. I'll link that in the description to go into more detail, but just real quick, you can see this round has a cavity in the nose of it. This is a 9mm Federal HST. That is my carry ammo. The cavity in the front of the bullet allows the bullet, when it impacts a soft target, ideally to expand. It's going to allow it to mushroom back. The pre-segmented brass petals on the front there are going to peel back and allow the lead core to mushroom, if you will. There's two purposes. One, it takes the energy of that projectile and dumps it in the intended target, and two, by slowing the bullet down, it seeks to limit over penetration. In other words, where it goes through the intended target and continues on past it, so limiting damage to property and innocent bystanders behind the target. So it's a twofold purpose. That is what you should carry in your gun, is some sort of self-defense ammo. If you live somewhere where hollow point bullets are illegal, it's sad that I even have to mention this, because I mean, if people are going to carry guns, I think that's the responsible thing to do. There are some self-defense alternatives out there. I think it's Lehigh has the Extreme Penetrator, which would not recommend, and the Extreme Defender rounds, and they're going to be monolithic copper projectiles. There's no lead involved, and they're not actually hollow. They actually kind of look like a Phillips screwdriver. Kind of cool rounds, and a neat workaround for that law. Full metal jacket is going to look similar to the round I just showed you, but instead of having a cavity in the center of the bullet, it's just going to be round. And those rounds are primarily target ammunition. Do they possess the ability to be lethal? Absolutely, they do. And you should treat them with respect. I figure most people know that. But yeah, they can hurt you, they can kill you. Treat them with respect. But they are good because they are more inexpensive than the hollow point round. So if you want to come out and practice, that's what you should do. The bullets have a range of weights. 9mm, the three most common are going to be 115 grain, 124 grain, and 147 grain. My hollow points that I carry are 124 grain. The most common weight for 9mm is going to be 115. So whatever self-defense ammo you use, you do need to shoot some of that through your gun. Make sure that it is going where you aim, and then make sure that the self-defense ammo, because it is more expensive, you're not going to be doing a lot of your target practice with that. Make sure that your self-defense ammo and your practice ammo shoot to the same point. Make sure that your bullet weights are the same. Some people think this is nitpicking, but you know, you're going to revert to your lowest level of training. So it's important to try to mimic the round that you carry in your gun for self-defense when you're out on the range. So for me, I carry 124 grain hollow point. I shoot 124 grain NATO spec ball ammunition. The recoil impulse is about the same, and using Federal NATO spec ammo, I get similar point of aim, point of impact on target. So I'm as closely mimicking my self-defense ammunition as I possibly can, whilst not actually buying that ammunition and spending much more money on my target practice. I know I have thrown a lot at you today. I apologize for that. This is something that I take very seriously. This is my hobby. This is what I do for fun. This is how I make extra money, etc. This is literally what I eat, sleep, and breathe. So I want you guys to be as prepared as possible. You new gun owners, getting out there buying your first handgun, most likely. And I want you to just kind of take it seriously. Please put in the time, effort, and just work in general to learn how to safely handle your gun, to learn how to be proficient with it. Seek out qualified instruction, if not in person right now with the social distancing. Then absolutely avail yourself of online resources, friends that you can talk to, that can maybe engage with you via messenger video calls or Skype video calls, etc., and demonstrate things for you. Be resourceful. You guys got this. But overall, I just want to stress safety. Again, just because you remove a magazine from a gun, most guns are still going to have the ability to fire, even if the magazine's removed. So you could have a round in here and pull the trigger and it could go off. So I want you all to be very, very careful of that. Please remember, when you take the magazine out, also take a second and check the chamber. If there's a round in there and it goes on the floor, okay, great, no big deal. It's much better to make sure that the gun is safe, and if you check it and it is safe, kudos, more power to you. Get in the habit of doing that every time. Get in the habit of keeping your finger off the trigger. Get in the habit of looking in your holster before you put the gun in there. These are things that you need to drill to the point of instinctual ability, and then still stay cognizant when you're out handling guns. It would be tragic to get a tool to defend yourself and your family only to end up injuring or killing yourself or somebody else in your family with that tool because you didn't take it serious. So with all that being said, guys, I don't mean to end on a dark and dreary note. If you're out there buying a gun to defend yourself and your family, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for recognizing that you alone are responsible for your safety and that of your family. I would urge you, if you are married and have other adults living in the home, make sure that they understand the safe operation of firearms, especially how to make sure they're unloaded. If you have kids in the home, I'm not going to tell you how to raise your kids. I would say definitely, though, or run your house. I'm not telling you how to do any of that, really, but kids are crazy. Kids are simultaneously smarter and dumber than we think they are, and simultaneously more capable and less capable than we think they are. So I've got a video on balancing safety and preparedness as far as having a gun accessible while still maintaining safety in the home. I have young kids. My wife and I have to be very cognizant of the fact that we do have young kids, curious kids, and my oldest does show an interest in firearms. So at his age and the age of all my children, it's very important that the guns are accounted for, safe, and that they have restricted access, that they cannot get to those guns. So I would urge you to think about that as well. I would say that in addition to a light, if you're going to be carrying your gun or using it for defensive purposes, and a quality holster, the other non-debatable for me would be a secure storage facility. Doesn't mean you have to go out and spend $5,000 on a safe. There are a lot of options out there. I'm going to stay away from recommending any specific ones just because I have very limited exposure on what I've reviewed. There are biometric safes available where they're very quick access but yet still secure, etc. Do some research. These things are getting more and more affordable every day, so there's really no excuse to not have one. Just again, it would be a shame for a tragedy to occur with a weapon that you bought for the purpose of safety. So that's going to come down to you being cognizant, being aware, being prepared, and disciplined with your firearms. Above all, guys, hopefully, if you're panic buying a gun right now, hopefully that's all for nothing. I hope that the need does not arise to where everyday Americans are having to defend themselves in droves from looters, raiders, whatever the situation in your head is, the apocalypse. But I would also urge you that if this does blow over, hopefully it does, that you have a very honest conversation with yourself and ask yourself, don't just put the gun in a safe in a closet and forget about it. Ask yourself, were you ready for what was happening? And I would argue that most of us are not. Most of us are not ready for this. Most of us are not ready for an apocalypse. A lot of people are going to be more prepared than others in certain areas, and a lot of people are going to be more lacking than others in certain areas. So with that mindset, when all this is over and life goes back to normal, the new normal, I would urge you that if you are one of these people that has picked up a gun for the first time in your life and now you have possession of that gun, ammo becomes more available, prices come back down, training becomes available again, avail yourself of that. Don't lose this energy now. I want you to make it a priority. And I challenge you to go out and get proficient with that gun, have a very honest conversation with yourself, look at the stats on crime, police response time, things like that, because it's not just the end of the world where you might have to protect yourself and your family. And this isn't a scare tactic. This is hard, fast evidence or evidence-based fact. There's a channel called Active Self-Protection. I urge you, if you have any doubt in your mind about how useful a firearm can be for a law-abiding citizen, check out Active Self-Protection. They have a variety of videos where they break down, these are real-life incidences, they break down things that are going on and when citizens defend themselves. I think it's very important for people to have a reality check and recognize what does exist in the world. There's an element of society that will always prey on the weak. Situations like these, it's evident that people realize that when the shepherd is either away or unavailable to protect the flock, that the wolves will come out to play. There are some wolves that are always out playing. So be prepared, defend yourself, defend your family, learn as much as you can. If anybody tells you they're an expert, a self-proclaimed expert is often not an expert. They're not. An expert is somebody who has nothing left to learn, and I think all of us always have something left to learn. So beware of somebody that tells you they alone have the answers. that they alone are qualified to teach you things. Pick up what you can, where you can. Make sure that it's from somebody qualified and reputable, and that's going to be pretty easy to determine, as I outlined earlier. I've rambled on enough, guys. I do appreciate you watching this video. I hope it helped you out in some small way, at least. If you would, and you're interested in learning more about guns, I have a variety of reviews on different guns. They potentially may be some of the ones you're looking at getting. I have some training tips and things like that up there for you as well as some political commentary that you may or may not care about or may disagree with, whatever. I think I'm funny. Some people think I'm funny. I'm probably not as funny as I think I am. So if you're interested in that stuff, go ahead and give me a subscribe. If this video helped you out, give me a thumbs up. That helps me measure if I'm connecting with you guys and helping you out. So I appreciate all of you that took the time to watch this video, all of you that have shared this video with your friends. I hope that it helps you guys out somewhat. So stay safe, get to shooting if you haven't already, get to training, and stay tuned. I'll have more stuff coming for you soon.